to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Dean Lariviere. Did I pronounce that right?
That's right.
Okay, great. Dean's the co-founder of SquareWon. Thanks for being with me here today.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on.
So today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and government intervention and CBDCs and things like that. Before we get into any of that, can you just give us a bit of background, like a 1 minute, like who are you and how are you in crypto?
Sure. So I started off in finance as a financial planner, working as a director for a firm right next door to where we are right now, actually. And advisors on my team and my own clients started asking about Bitcoin in 2017. At the same time, some of my friends were telling me about it, and I did some research into it. Full disclosure, my research was aimed at finding why my clients shouldn't buy Bitcoin. Because I saw this as a potential threat to the existing system, right, and to my personal assets under management. And here we are 6 years later, haven't found a reason to not invest in Bitcoin. And in fact, I'm in the space founding a project that's designed to help people learn about this new asset class without having to put their hard-earned dollars into this nascent market that's extremely volatile.
Was the issue with being a certified financial planner and Bitcoin related to the fact that you couldn't make money as a planner investing your clients' money into Bitcoin, or was it, or was it because you weren't allowed to?
It's a combination of both of them. Because the way licensing works, around investing, like I couldn't give clients advice even on stock because I wasn't IROC licensed. I was MDFA, like the Mutual Fund Dealers Association. So I could put people in mutual funds or segregated funds, insurance products, but not even stock. So Bitcoin, because there's no licensing regime at all in Canada, no financial planner is allowed to suggest or give advice on these digital assets, which leaves a massive void, which allows for people who are less, they're a little unscrupulous and don't have the feeling of a fiduciary duty to their clients to come in and give people advice like put it all in Doge.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Have you ever seen the Doge McLaren parked out front of the hotel here?
No.
Oh, there's this McLaren that's always here. I think they live in the hotel. Maybe they listen to this podcast. I mean, why wouldn't they, right? They live here, and they have their whole McLaren is wrapped in little Doge dog pictures.
Amazing.
And I think they have a hashtag. It's like hashtag like Doge Claren or something like that.
That's amazing. I wonder where they got the money for that McLaren.
I feel like I heard the story that they won the McLaren at some kind of crypto contest during the bull run or something like that.
Okay. So it's not like they invested in Doge and used the money to buy it.
Like maybe
they won it.
I need to learn the story about these people. So if you're listening.
Yeah, just put a business card in their windshield.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Call me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do a podcast in our lobby.
You're right. Yeah.
You really should come and tell the story to the people. They want to know.
That's a good idea. I'm sure they're true degens. Okay. So what are some of the key reasons why you believe Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have the potential to be a path for financial freedom?
Well, for me, the main thing that I found interesting about Bitcoin is, just the fact that it eliminates the need for an intermediary, right? Just this ability for you and I to transact with each other in a trustless way. I don't know you, you don't know me. And in the past, the only way that human beings have been able to figure out how to do that is through an intermediary. And that's all banks do, right? They just hold the ledger. Like, okay, you have $100 and you have zero. Now you've given him $100, so now you have zero and he has $100. That's all they do, right? There's lending and all that sort of stuff too, but effectively they're making sure that people don't spend their money twice, right? And when it was all cash, it was, that was kind of easy to do, but people didn't want to hold on to all that cash, so they had to put it somewhere. So there had to be a record of that. And we trusted the banking system to do that for us. After 2008, I think a lot of us didn't trust the banks in a lot of ways before that, but I think it really became, something that was more of a global phenomenon where people were like, oh, wait a minute, like those people really don't have, like, it's not just conspiracy theorists saying that like people in the banking industry are controlling the world. It's like, no, they actually mess things up for can I swear on this podcast?
Sure.
Okay, I just got to It will come up unless I'm like really diligently like minding. I'm like, I'm just going to pretend you're like one of my children. I'm going to try not to swear, or I can be myself.
You
so
can
thank
be
you.
yourself.
Appreciate that. So the banking system fucked up the world and then had zero repercussions, right? And like people are okay with like you fuck up the world, that's cool, but you should be fucked up too, right? Why does everybody else get screwed and then you still get your bonus this year? Like I think it just struck a chord with people, and all of us just felt impotent to do anything about it. And here's Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever and whatever that group of people or individual was, that said, no, you know what? Like I'm gonna fucking do something about it. And like just like an alchemist took all these different pieces that were already in place and like brilliantly put them together into this thing that now makes that core function of what banks do obsolete.
Yeah.
And so the problem with the banking system is that ability for outside influences to get in and muck with it, right? You know, and including, you know, central banks increasing the money supply, you know, and basically causing inflation, right? So Bitcoin being a fundamentally deflationary asset, it's not subject to those same challenges, those same manipulations that the traditional banking system has. And so, you know, when you look at the world, you think of all the technological advances that we've made in the last 100 years, we should be able to have the same like standard of living. You and I, each individual that's listening to this podcast, should be able to have the same standard of living and work 10 hours a week, right? If the benefits of the advancements in technology were evenly distributed amongst the population, you could work 10 hours a week, maybe even less, and make the same income. But instead, all of that is getting siphoned off, being pulled out by the banking system, really the Fed, by printing money. And what happens when you print money? You dilute the money supply. You know, you look at it in Venezuela, you look at it in Lebanon, you look at it historically in Hungary and Germany. And as long as you're close to that printing press, you get to spend those dollars as dollars. But as it gets farther from the printing press, oh, now inflation's kicked in. So now that dollar's worth 94 cents. And then the next sucker who gets it is worth 88 cents. And on it goes, to the point where like the same basket of goods that you could have bought in 1960 for $1 is $100 now, or whatever the math works out to be. It's incredible.
It's interesting. I mean, this type of narrative is, you know, I had Jeff Booth on the podcast, and he talks quite aggressively about this, and also we hear other you know, other people like Robert Kiyosaki or Ray Dalio, you know, talking about this type of the inflationary problem that we have right now. And I mean, it certainly has been amplified since the pandemic, and we are in the midst of, you know, we don't know what it's going to look like in the future, because there seems to be so much unknown at this point. So how can people benefit from learning about investing in digital assets?
Well, I mean, by learning about investing in them, they prepare themselves to actually do that thing and make that leap, right? And this is really where SquareWon came from. Was this my business partner Dan and I? He's also a financial planner, and we just saw people, you know, coming to us asking about the space. Us not being it, like for my friends, like again, I hope there's no regulators listening to this, but my friends, obviously I would tell them like my opinion and what I thought and stuff like that, but I couldn't do that with clients. And so what we would see is those clients go, okay, well, they'll go find that information somewhere. So they're going on YouTube and they're listening to people who are probably paid to shill these projects, and then they're investing in these projects. And the only people that are really making money are the influencers and the bag holders that started the project. Or they're talking to friends who are really well-meaning, but they're not actually as well-versed as they need to be, and there's key pieces of information that people aren't getting. So to me, I think the key to the question is how can people benefit by learning how to invest, as opposed to how can people benefit by investing?
Right.
And I really think that like a brand new asset class like this, that number one has, you know, a technological aspect to it that maybe for some of us that are a little bit longer in the tooth are maybe not as easy to grasp. And it's definitely gotten better. Like the user interface and stuff like that for a lot of these wallets has really come a long way, but it's still buyer beware, right? And it's radical self-control over your finances, and you can't just call the bank and be like, oh, I lost my password, right? So it's really, really important that people understand how to invest in these things before putting their money in. Otherwise, you're going to be that guy who's trying to dig a fucking landfill up to get the computer that he threw away because he forgot that he had Bitcoin on it.
That's a classic story, right?
Yeah.
So what is SquareWon's? So SquareWon's looking to educate people in crypto. Is it just buying crypto assets? Is it about NFTs as well? Is it like how to create a wallet? Like to what extent are you guys looking to go?
I mean, ideally, we'd love to be that one-stop shop for everybody who wants to come into the digital asset space, whether it's NFTs, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's altcoins, right? And there's lots of places that people can go already for education. So we're not trying to compete with Binance Academy or Moralis or any of these other courses that are out there. But what we see is as a gap. For example, we don't give people a written test and then say you're licensed, you can now go drive, right? You have to do a driving test, right? And back in the day, I used to do a lot of safety training, and I would teach people how to operate mobile equipment. And we never sent them out on the job site until they proved competency in a real world situation. Not quite real world. It was a simulated world situation, which is really what we're trying to build with SquareWon. Like a mock environment where it feels like you're using a wallet, and we probably have an in-game, not a cryptocurrency that's intended to be on the market and sold, and we get in trouble with securities regulations, that like an actual token for the game where people can use it and simulate what it's like to use digital assets so that they can practice until they're ready. Right?
Yeah.
There's no place for people where the rubber hits the road other than, okay, I learned a bit about Bitcoin, and then now I'm going to go throw my money in the market. And there's a lot of people that have that aggressive of a risk tolerance, and they're going to be willing to do that, but most people don't. And so those are the people that are sitting on the sidelines, they're interested in it, they're looking at it, but they're not ready to do it. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we make it easy for people to learn about it so that they feel comfortable enough with their knowledge of the space to go, okay, I'm ready to invest, and I'm not investing in Doge because I saw a McLaren with a bunch of stickers on it. I'm investing in it because I believe in the team behind it and the principles behind it and the goals that they have. And Doge maybe isn't a good example, but something like Cardano or something that's got a purpose behind it. And now you get people that are investing based on, how they like the resonance that they have with the project, not FOMO. Yeah. Right. And that's to me how you go from paper hands to diamond hands eventually, which is people that are buying because they believe in the project and they want to support it. I think that's really where the space is going to go or needs to go.
So in your opinion, when you look at some of the features of Bitcoin specifically is decentralization. Why do you think that that's important, and what are the advantages of the decentralization of a digital asset?
Well, it comes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Which is control, right? And the more centralized something is, and again, I think a lot of times centralization gets a bad rap, like it's a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing, right? Some things need to be centralized, right? Like I don't want all of my data about my personal health history to be decentralized necessarily. But for something like these transactions, right? Like having a record of transactions that are happening on a blockchain like Bitcoin, which again is a worldwide system of money. I want that to be decentralized so nobody can go in and muck with it. Right. The problem with ledgers is that they can be fudged. Right. And there's plenty of examples of this over the years of people that have done a really good job of messing with ledgers, and it fools people just long enough for them to siphon off as much money as they need to go and live in some tropical location for the rest of their lives, right? Yeah. Bitcoin solves that.
So do you think that these cryptocurrencies are going to shape the global landscape, the financial global landscape?
100%. Yes. Yeah. It's inevitable, right? It's like,
so what does that actually end up looking like then? Like if Bitcoin becomes more popular than it is today, whatever that really means, like how does it change the way people do things?
Well, for one thing, it puts a lot more money in people's pockets, right? Like right now, the banking system is bleeding off, 2 to 3% of GDP, right? You look at any bank, like Royal, but every quarter they're like a $9 billion profit and blah blah blah. Like for what? For shit that they do that we don't need to be done anymore because Bitcoin exists, right? It's like banking is obsolete. and the world just hasn't caught on to it yet. Just like buggy whips were obsolete as soon as Ford invented the Model T.
Sure.
Right?
But it took a bit of time.
It took a bit of time. And so, you know, a lot of my friends believe that there's a giant crash coming and like everything's going to get leveled and then sort of Bitcoin will rise as this thing that like, oh, look, all your government, like imagine you lived in Venezuela 5 years ago and you owned a bunch of, and again, not even like, I don't think that people should be 100% in on Bitcoin. I know there's lots of people that are, but I think like as a financial planner, I'm still like, oh, it's a volatile asset, keep it to 10% of your net worth kind of thing. But if I'm in Venezuela and I've got 10% of my net worth in Bitcoin and all of a sudden my money's getting inflated to the point where I need to, like they're using it for art,
right?
Like they're making t-shirts and shit out of their bills down there because they're that worthless. But now you've got this Bitcoin. The value of the Bitcoin hasn't changed, right? Or maybe it went up and down with the market or whatever, but because your currency just blah, so the amount that you can buy with one Satoshi has now doubled, tripled, quadrupled, right? To me, that's financial freedom.
I think what's interesting about that, and I think a lot of people don't take into consideration that when priced in Bitcoin, everything is much cheaper now than it was 4 years ago or 6 years ago or 10 years ago. And so when we price things actually in Bitcoin, it used to, what was remember the guy, the first Bitcoin transaction, maybe in 2011, he bought a pizza. And I can't remember, it cost him a few thousand Bitcoin. Now that pizza, that Bitcoin may be worth $3 billion or something like that, right? It's the worst transaction in human history. However, it was an important transaction. He was the poor soul that did it. But anyways,
and people forget, like he bought that pizza with Bitcoin, then he could just as easily have said, okay, well, I'm going to take the $30 and I could just buy more Bitcoin.
Sure.
Right. And like people say, like, why would I buy a pizza with Bitcoin? It might be worth, well, you can just, right. For me, and this is Jeff Booth talks about this a lot as well, that when you look at like Bitcoin's price isn't going up, everything else is getting more expensive, and Bitcoin is the measure of that.
Right.
Which I thought was really, it was kind of like one of those things like when you look at those shapes and you're looking at the faces and all of a sudden it's a vase, it just like flips your perception. I'm like, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because that really is what's happening if you look at it that way. And yeah, I forget what I was going to say after that.
So what are your thoughts on CBDCs?
What's a CBDC?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm just
you
kidding.
Flipped it on me.
I flipped it on you, yeah. Central Bank Digital Currencies. Yeah, I mean, potentially the most evil idea the world has ever come up with, disguised in something that's supposed to be helpful for people. Yeah. And I actually, I'll credit Jeff Booth with this as well. I was actually pretty scared of these things until I watched a podcast with him, and he said, yeah, I'm not too worried about it. And they were like, why not? I said, because it'll never work. Oh, what do you mean? So in order for it to work, it would have to be a global CBDC, right? So if you're the United States and you create a central bank digital currency that we know full well with a push of a button, they can make it not work anymore. They can make it so that it decreases by 15% every month if they want people to go out and spend money, right? They can turn it off if you've spent too much on carbon stuff, or how long until that becomes a values-based thing. Oh, you've over-consumed alcohol this month, sir. Right? Because I bought some booze for a party, and you know what I mean? Like it's just the amount of control that's possible in that is ridiculous. And so as a citizen, that has me really concerned. But what Jeff pointed out is, how are they going to make global payments with that? What other country is going to be willing to accept payment in a currency that they know you can turn off like that?
Right.
I was like, oh. Yeah. Right? So what's going to happen? Well, possibly Bitcoin ends up being that means of international transaction, and then eventually people are like, well, if Bitcoin is being used for international transaction, why can't I just use it here? And unless governments try and outlaw it, which again, they've outlawed gold in the past, so we know that there's precedent for this. But I also think that people didn't mobilize back then as well as they can now. And I think if they tried to outlaw Bitcoin, I mean, first of all, you're putting your country at a disadvantage. If Canada decides to outlaw Bitcoin, guess what? All these other countries are still going to be using it. They're still going to be adopting it. They're still going to be making massive gains, and creative people are going to be creating amazing things with this product, just not in Canada.
Yeah.
So it ends up putting you at a disadvantage. So I really don't think that they're going to do that. Right. And so eventually I think it's just one of these things that just over time, because it's better, it's like evolution, right? You might say like, oh, a butterfly looks stupid with those little eyes on the back of it. But over time, predators eat it less and it just proliferates. And because and at the end of the day, if Bitcoin can't survive, if it can't compete with central bank digital currencies or whatever other bullshit these people in power want to come up with, then it doesn't deserve to be the thing that we think that it is. But I think it will. I think it'll outperform them all. Again, with Lightning now, and you can transact, in seconds for fractions of a penny. You compare that to Square, you compare that to sending Western Union, it's a no-brainer for people. Yeah, I mean the retailers, restaurant owners, the hotel operators, to give credit card companies and Moneris and other transaction holders 3 or 4% of their revenue is expensive, right? It's insane. And to be able to dial that back down to a fraction of a penny is pretty significant. So if we look, another thing, when you think about CBDCs, it's like, imagine if I fall out of favor with the government and I've paid you something. That dollar I've given you could be tracked, and now you also get punished for doing business with me because that dollar is now, you can't use it. Yeah. So now you're thinking, well, who am I going to do business with, or who am I going to send dollars with or accept them? Because if I accept payment from an unscrupulous character in the government's opinion, now all of a sudden I can't use those dollars until maybe they meet some type of penalty. Maybe they need to do these things, and then those dollars get released, and you think, wow, the amount of control around this is so significant. It sounds like an efficient use of capital to distribute money digitally. I think the other challenge is that people don't see this as any different as our current currency, because it's kind of digital, right? Because it's through Interact and it happens online, and so it's viewed. Is it really actually that different than a CBDC? In most people's eyes, it isn't really. It's not viewed by most people as anything different. Well, and that's the interesting thing, right? Is it doesn't really have to be much different. Like, your experience of it could be very much the same. Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Until it's not. Yeah, exactly. Right? And that's the scary part about it. And like, you're right, 99% of money today is digital. So there's only like 1% of the money that's created is actually printed anymore. And it makes sense, right? How much cash do you have in your pocket right now? Yeah, $0. I also have $0 in my pocket. Yeah. Right? So it makes sense that people are going to be like, oh, what's the big deal? No, it is. It's a very big deal, because the digital money that we have right now it's not actual money. It's just an entry in a ledger kept by a bank, right? And again, we have central banks that can just like add more ledger entries, right? Like come on. Yeah. If you had the ability to just wave your hand and create a pile of money on the table today, would you? Yeah. Fuck yeah, you would. Of course. I'd love to believe that I had the moral fortitude to be able to go like, no, that's wrong. We know you don't. Right? Because it's also like, it's kind of a victimless crime. Like, who is this really hurting? I mean, yes, millions of people down the road, but at the moment, it's like, no, we're just creating money. That's what we do. And we have economists that tell us that this is the best way to avoid the boom and bust cycle. Yeah. Who decided that the boom and bust cycle should be avoided anyways? Right. Right? The same fucking people that like prevent forest fires. I was just going to say that. Right? And you prevent them and you prevent them and you prevent them. And all of a sudden one spark comes in and just whoosh. Yeah. And it's like a massive, like the reason why we're having massive forest fires today is because they don't allow them to happen the way nature intended them to. Small fires, get rid of the dead wood, right? Like some of these fucking banks from 2008. Right? They're dead wood, right? They should not be like, everybody else in the world has to compete, and everybody else in the world rises or falls based on their individual ability to compete with other entities, but not banks. Yeah. That's like you couldn't design, if you were trying to design a system that would create inequity, you couldn't have built a better system than that. Do whatever you want with impunity. Yeah. Totally. So where do you think, or what do you think is the best way
to raise awareness amongst maybe our friends and family or the general public on the dangers of CBDCs?
I mean, I think things like this are very important, right? People like yourself, like having people on and talking about CBDCs. I really respect, I don't know if you know Michelle McCory from Kitco News. Like, I feel like every interview I've seen with her, she brings it up, right? And more, like, we just need people to be bringing this to the forefront of people's attention, so that people understand, like, when you hear CBDC, and even if it's not stated that way, right? Because I heard recently, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was talking about the fact that they're not going to need to create a new thing,
Right.
In order for it to be a CBDC, they don't have to do, like, it's not like they're going to be rolling out this thing like, now it's a CBDC. What they're going to do is they're going to move our individual accounts from a bank to the Fed.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And it's going to be amazing for you because you get that 5% rate from the Fed that the banks do.
Right.
Imagine having a savings account. You can get 5% on it.
Yeah.
Who's going to say no to that? Especially because regional banks are going to start, I'm going out on a limb and I'm predicting something, that regional banks are going to start failing on a massive scale. I heard recently that 80% of most regional banks' holdings is commercial real estate. Okay. Think about commercial real estate today. Right? I've heard, there's a commercial real estate Armageddon coming. Everybody's working from home, right? My old office right over there is 90% empty, for sure, but they're in a lease till 2025.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen in are they going to stay in there? No. So over the next couple of years, you're going to see all these leases expiring and people are not renewing them. They're like, no, we'll take an office for 4, please.
Yeah.
Right? And so all these buildings that used to be worth $150 million, now 90, 80, 70, big crash in that. Who gets hurt the most? Regional banks.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's, again, the same person. Was it Dave Gagnon? Dave Gagnon. He called it the crisis industrial complex.
Okay.
Right? Create a crisis, present the solution to the crisis.
Yeah.
So that, make the people demand that solution.
Yes.
Right? So all these banks start failing all over the place and the Fed can just say, well, I mean, one thing we could do, I guess, is take everybody's balance from those banks and just move it over to the Fed's balance sheet.
We'll help you out with
this. We really don't want to do that. We're guys, okay, twist our arm. Sure, let's do it.
So why do you think it is that CBDCs are often tied to the conversation of cryptocurrencies? And can you explain how they're different?
Ooh.
Because they're digital, right?
Right.
So how is it different?
Yeah, I mean, really, a CBDC is essentially a cryptocurrency, just a extremely centralized one, right? So, if I wanted to create my own currency, I could, like an ERC20 token, I create it in 20 minutes. I can hand it out to all my friends, and I can control it too, right? The difference is, though, is that they're providing this as fiat currency. Right. So it's backed by the government. So people will trust it and spend it. But in the meantime, because it's not open source, you can't go in. Like, if I tried to create a currency like that myself as a crypto, first of all, it'd have to be a black box. I wouldn't want anybody to look inside it and see how I've programmed it. And I guarantee the CBDC is not going to be open source. And then if I did that, the community at large would be like, pfft, right? Rug pull, stay away from this project. We can't see into it at all. Yeah. Why would we be interested in this thing at all? So to me, the difference between a cryptocurrency and a CBDC is the fact that a cryptocurrency is tied to a community, right? And even if it has to be centralized at first, in order, you gotta bootstrap this thing, right? You gotta prime the pump and you gotta market it and everything like that. And I think that people deserve to be rewarded for those efforts. I think there's a balance to be found between how do we prevent straight up rug pulls, but still give people the autonomy to launch these projects on a path towards decentralization, because you can't start decentralized. It doesn't make any, how would that work?
Yes.
But it's the community aspect of that and the feedback loops that people have and just the amazing people on the internet that will look into the stuff that people will look into and will find and they'll dig into things, right? Because it has that ability, it's almost self-correcting. Yeah. Right. And we don't always get it right. But when you decentralize those kinds of problems, this is the main problem with CBDCs and central planning in general, is it works against the principles of the universe. right? The universe works on this principle of like everybody's kind of doing their thing, and everybody's kind of like, we care about other people, but we also have enlightened self-interest, and so we're doing things that are the best for us. It turns out that's usually what's best for other people as well, because we're a cooperative species. And in the end, just like without even really trying, good shit happens, right?
Yeah.
And you contrast that with, I know what I need to do, and I'm the one who's right, and I'm going to decide for all you all how things need to happen.
Yeah.
And there's Stalin, and
Totally.
there's Hitler, and there's,
Yeah. I think it's interesting because your comment about things don't start out decentralized. Like Bitcoin has become more and more decentralized as time has progressed, as more and more people started to mine or operate nodes and things like that.
It would have started on one computer, though.
Exactly. And with the vision of becoming decentralized. And so we see with Satoshi Nakamoto saying, decentralization is important. It started off, with one or two computers. And now I have read that maybe there's around 1 million of them today that are operating the ledger, which is pretty incredible.
Another key difference that we should point out, too, is that there wasn't like a founder's allotment.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
When like you had to run a node on your computer from the very beginning, Bitcoin was earned. Right? Like there's no free Satoshi, there's no such thing as a free Satoshi.
Yes.
Right? And I love this concept of like, if you really think about it, there's only going to be ever 21 million of them. How many of them have been lost already?
Yeah.
Like the cap is probably more like 18 million right now with all the ones that have been lost. But right now, like this moment in time, you can still go out and buy a Bitcoin. You can still go out and buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, right? A time will come when you will not be able to just go out and buy a Bitcoin. You will have to deliver value and be paid in Bitcoin if you want to have Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We're at a rare moment in time where people can still take this fucking shit coin known as the US dollar or the Canadian dollar and trade it for something that has real value.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because, even when you look at how many maybe millionaires there are in the world, if every millionaire owned, not every millionaire would be able to own a Bitcoin. There's not enough of them out there for every millionaire in the world to own a Bitcoin. And when you think of, when you kind of break down the stats of how many Bitcoins there are out there, there being 21 million and probably 18 million still around that people can find. Satoshi has 1 million Bitcoin in his own wallet that has never ever been moved. And so there are situations like that. And we think about this, it's like, well, because of the supply and especially the reduced supply coming on chain as we go through Bitcoin halvings, which is going to happen in 2024, the next time. And so you see the reduction of the production of Bitcoin happening every 4 years. It's quite significant for boosting the value of the coin.
I will say this though, every millionaire in the world could have 1 million US shitcoins worth of Bitcoin.
They could. Yeah.
They don't all necessarily need a Bitcoin.
That's right.
As
you can fractionalize it.
Well, as millionaires started to buy it, the value, like obviously supply and demand. Oh, geez, all these Bitcoins are coming off the market. People are charging more for it.
Yeah.
Yada yada yada. The last millionaire to buy his $1 million worth of Bitcoin would just be buying it at. I get half a Bitcoin now because the value's gone up so much.
Because the value's at
Yeah.
$500,000 or
So all those millionaires out there, you better start getting your Bitcoin now.
Okay, this has been a really interesting conversation. As we wrap up, is there anything else that you feel passionate about related to cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, or even education at SquareWon?
Yeah, I mean, so much. I'm really optimistic about the future, and it's really because I've been spending time lately like listening to really smart people talk about this space, and I think it's really easy to get caught up in the fear, the FUD as we like to say in the space, right? But especially like there's a lot of fear in the world these days. People are thinking like the world's going to hell in a handbasket and everything, and it's helpful to look back and like, in my mother's time and in my grandmother's time, like they all said the same thing, right? Like in the 60s they thought the world was going to die because of
Vietnam War.
Well, the Vietnam War, there was definitely the whole thing with communist Russia and everything like that. But also, like we're talking about global warming now, but back in the 60s they were worried about another ice age.
Right.
And there's always this thing.
Always a thing. The hole in the ozone.
Right, exactly. Which was actually a really great example of people actually coming together and like fixing a problem like that, right? And I believe we're still capable of doing that. People see divisiveness everywhere, And I just always like to remind my friends, like our brains are designed to find problems for you, right? It's designed to keep you alive. Like, is that orange and black stripy thing amongst the trees a tiger? Like, you don't spend time going, I wonder if it, no, you just leave, right? You get that fight or flight response because our brains are designed to find negative things. So when you're looking around the world, you're going to see negative things, but it's, with 8 billion people on the planet, there's 1,000 people doing everything that you could possibly imagine. And some of it is really shitty. And if you focus on that all the time, you're going to think the world's a shitty place. And unfortunately, that's what the news does.
Right.
And so I've just turned off the news. I just don't care anymore because I look around, the things I see with my eyes, right? The human beings that I interact with on a daily basis are amazing, right? They have love and light in their heart and in their eyes, and they're out there doing amazing things. And I think, okay, if these are the people that I'm surrounded by, why would I think that the rest of the world is shit?
Yeah.
Right? It's just a message that I'm getting from my paranoid brain, and I just need to get that out of the way sometimes and just trust more.
Yeah.
Right? But trust your universe, but tie up your camel. Is that what they say? So, so buy some
That's
Bitcoin.
great.
Because the other thing I was going to say, though, is that probably the best way, there's the education side about CBDCs and like helping people understand the danger of it, but there's also the protective side. And I think a really good way to protect yourself is to have some exposure to Bitcoin. Not cryptocurrency. I think cryptocurrencies are great and they're interesting, and I think that there's always going to be a market for them, just like there's penny stocks. But I really think that Bitcoin can do basically everything that we need it to do as far as the financial system goes.
Right.
And so to me, I think if you want to have some sort of hedge against this potential threat of central bank digital currencies, owning some Bitcoin is a great, simple, easy, kind of like now, I believe, low risk way to do that.
Excellent. That's great. Well, Dean, it's been excellent talking to you. It's been really helpful to understand kind of the basics of CBDCs and Bitcoin and learning about some of the things that we need to be aware of. I really appreciate you being with me here today.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.